What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here for Week 10 NFL picks and predictions. Last week we had an all-right week, going 8-5. I think a lot of people struggled last week because there's a lot of upsets, like the Vikings upsetting the Lions, the Steelers over the Colts, the Panthers over the Packers. But our season total is still 90, 43, and 1 on the season, bringing us to a 67.7% win rate on the year. There's a guy on ESPN, Pigskin Pick'em, at 104 and 28 on the season, which is incredible. I think he was number one in the world last week as well. But with that said, let's get into the Thursday night matchup here between the Raiders and the Broncos. The Broncos are coming into this game 7-2. They're on a 6-game winning streak. I think that Bo Nix does just enough in this game to win it. He has a lot of good targets to throw to in Sutton, Franklin, Mims. But I will say this Raiders defensive line, I think it's better than most people think. I think it's pretty formidable. I think that Crosby and Wilkins can cause some problems. And then, Brock Bowers coming back for this offense for the Raiders. I think that that's an immediate impact. We saw that last week. And I think Genty, he's shown some promise as well this season, despite running behind a pretty bad offensive line in the Raiders. But ultimately, I think that's why the Broncos win this game, is because their front seven is just so good. And I think that they just get, they score enough points to win this game at home in Denver. But I think Geno Smith is going to throw a lot of picks with that front seven coming at him. But give me the Broncos there in Denver. Then we have the Falcons at 3-5, the Colts 7-2. Give me the Falcons here to upset. One big reason here is because I don't think the Colts play nearly as good outdoors, and this game is going to be outdoors in Germany, in Berlin, Germany. This game should be in the 40s, and it should be kind of a rainy environment. So I like that for the Falcons. We saw the Colts play their first game outdoors in 6 weeks. Last week versus Pittsburgh, and they turned the ball over 6 times. So I think there's something there. I think the Falcons, they can win this game. We saw Penix throwing the ball last week. Drake London, I should say, had 3 touchdowns last week. And I think this Colts secondary can be exploited a little bit. So give me the Falcons. I think the Falcons can beat anybody. We saw them beat the Bills earlier this season. And I think Raheem Morris puts on a good defensive game plan. And I think the Falcons get away with one here. And I think the Colts go into the bye, losing 2 in a row. Then we have the Browns at 2-6, at the Jets 1-7. People are kind of split on this game. I think both of these teams are coming off the bye. The Browns defense has been pretty great all season long, but they did struggle in their last matchup against the Patriots. And then you're looking at the Jets. Garrett Wilson should be coming back for the Jets. Breece Hall has looked like a really good running back this season, but obviously neither team is really getting good quarterback play. But I'm going to take Dylan Gabriel and the Browns here. I just think that they're a little bit better. If Dylan Gabriel, though, if he doesn't play good in this game, I wouldn't be surprised if Shador comes in. Then we have the Steelers at 5-3, at the Chargers 6-3. I went back and forth with this, but I'm going to pick my Chargers here. I think they win it. 73% of people are picking the Chargers. And obviously the Steelers are coming off a big win. Their defense looked pretty solid last week, and I do fear Cameron Hayward and TJ Watt. I think they're going to give this Chargers offensive line a lot of trouble. Obviously, last week, the Chargers lost Joe Alt as well for the season, which is a huge blow to their offensive line that was already banged up. And I think defensively, this Chargers team is kind of susceptible to big plays. I think they can give up big plays on the ground as well. But luckily for them, I don't think the Steelers have all that great of a running attack. I don't fear Jaylen Warren all that much. So I think that Herbert can outduel Rodgers in this game. I think Herbert also has the better skill players in this game. So give me the Chargers at home, but that offensive line for the Chargers really does scare me. Then we have the Giants at 2-7, at the Bears 5-3. Give me the Bears with 83% of people picking them. I question how motivated the Giants are to win games. They're super injured, super banged up, and I think they're just looking for Jackson Dart to continue to grow like he is. I don't think a high draft pick, hurts this Giants team in the future. And you're looking at this Bears defense. I think it can be exploited, but I think they lead the league in takeaways, I should say. So I like that for the Bears. And I think that Caleb Williams has improved. He hasn't gotten sacked like he was last season, and he doesn't turn over the ball all that much. I think that Ben Johnson is a really good coach, which is another reason I like the Bears here over, Dable and the Giants. Then you have the Saints at 1-8, at the Panthers 5-4. The Saints right now are averaging 15 points a game. I think Dowdle, the running back for the Panthers, has been a great running back, one of the better players in the NFL this season. I think because of him, the Panthers kind of have a play action threat, and which is obviously great for Bryce Young. And I think the Panthers have a pretty fast defense too. So give me the Panthers here at home. I also think the Panthers play a lot better at home. Then we have the Ravens at 3-5 at the Vikings 4-4. 74% of people are picking the Ravens, and so am I. I think the Ravens are desperate to get wins. I think they're a really hungry team, and I think they're getting a little bit healthier too. But I do worry a little bit about the Vikings. Obviously, their home field advantage is really, really good, and J.J. McCarthy kind of looked good last week. I thought that they didn't ask him to do too much last week, and they kind of, relied more so on the running with Mason and Aaron Jones. But I think, in order to take advantage of this Ravens defense, you got to throw on it. So I think JJ is going to have to do that in this game. I just trust the Ravens and Lamar Jackson more here in this matchup, but that's going to be a tough one for the Ravens. Then we move on to the Patriots at 7-2 at the Buccaneers 6-2. Give me the Buccaneers here to win. I think Baker off a bye with Godwin and Bucky, coming back likely for this game. I think that's going to be a big deal in this one. And, I think the Patriots, this is probably the best team that they have played in the past 4 weeks. I think this Buccaneers defensive line always comes ready to play, and I think they're going to give Drake May some trouble. Drake May has been playing good football all season long, but I think this is a really good defensive front. One thing I am keeping an eye on is Baker Mayfield's shoulder. He came into the bye, a little bit injured with that shoulder, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. But I do like the Buccaneers to win that one coming off the bye. Then we have the Jaguars at 5-3 at the Texans 3-5. 60% of people are picking the Texans right now. I don't know if CJ Stroud is going to be playing in this one, but I'm probably going to pick the Texans regardless, even if he's not, just because of how well this Texans defense has been playing. This is also the Texans' third consecutive game at home, and the Jaguars' second consecutive game on the road, so I like that as well. I don't love taking Davis Mills if that is the case in this game, but I think the running game for the Texans and Chubbs and Marks can do enough, as well as this defense. So give me the Texans there. Then we have the Bills at 6-2 at the Dolphins 2-7. Give me the Bills here. I think there is a world where the Dolphins upset. The Dolphins are kind of coming off of a mini bye. It's their second consecutive game at home. The one thing stopping me though from picking it is that the Dolphins traded away Jalen Phillips, one of their better players, for a future draft pick. So you kind of wonder how committed they are right now. Last week versus Buffalo, I think this defensive front for the Bills looked really, really good. So I think that that's going to create some problems for Tua coming into this game. I think if the Bills coming into this game, they could be a little bit high after beating the Chiefs, coming into it on a little bit of a high, and maybe underestimate, the Dolphins a little bit, and Achane kind of gets going, and Tua kind of has a game like he did against the Falcons. I think they could win this game at home. But give me the Bills here, 97% of people picking the Bills. Then we have the Rams at 6-2 at the 49ers, 6-3. The 49ers won the first matchup here of the season, and I think that they end up splitting the series. Give me the Rams here. I even like that this game is in San Francisco. I think that those games at SoFi, they kind of get taken over by the opposing fans a lot of the time. So I like the fact that it's in San Francisco. I think the Rams have been great. They've beaten their last 3 opponents by at least 14 points. I think Shanahan, though, and Saleh have been a great duo coaching this season, one of the better coaching duos in the league. So you have to respect them. I think that they've still put up a good defensive team despite all of the injuries. So I think they have to be respected. But give me the Rams to win that game. I just really like the way that they're headed this season. Then we have the Eagles at 6-2 at the Packers 5-2-1. Give me the Packers to bounce back and win this game. The Eagles are coming off of a bye, but I almost feel like that kind of hurts them. I think that they're going to be a little bit slow getting into it, especially on offense, getting back into rhythm. You would expect Saquon to be a factor, but I think this Packers defense, especially the run defense, has been pretty solid. And, the Packers, they seem to kind of play down to opponents. We saw that last week against the Panthers. I think they take the Eagles seriously here. This is the second consecutive game at home for the Packers. And I really like this Packers running back room with Josh Jacobs. I think that Jordan Love does just enough. I think that, Josh Jacobs has a big game here. So give me the Packers in that one to win it in another upset. So thank you guys for watching this video. I will be back next week for another video, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.